It's the most magical time of the year, and I'm not talking about Christmas. I'm talking about the NFL season. So make sure you're ready with NFL Sunday Ticket and YouTube TV. Get the most live NFL games all in one place. Right now, you can save $85 when you bundle NFL Sunday Ticket with YouTube TV. Sign up today at youtubetv.com/Spotify. Device and content restrictions apply. Discount applied to first 4 months of YouTube TV, then $72.99 a month. Ends August 29th. Terms, restrictions, and embargoes apply. No refunds.
Hi, everyone, and welcome on into a brand new edition of Eye on the Enemy, brought to you by the Pin Pull Network. I'm your host, John Stolnis. I write for bleedinggreennation.com, but I podcast for the brand new Pin Pull Network, and man, do we have a 2024 season set up for you. Of course, this podcast, the Eye on the Enemy podcast, is back for another season. This is the podcast where we take a deep dive into whatever team the Eagles happen to be playing that week, and I will usually talk to someone who covers that team on a regular basis so we can get an inside look, and I keep an eye on the enemy. That's where the title of the podcast comes from. But here in the preseason, we take a step back, and on this episode of the podcast, I'm going to give you 5 preseason observations. The Eagles have 2 preseason games in the book so far. I also wrote a piece for Bleeding Green Nation this week, 10 bold predictions for the 2024 Eagles season, and then I'm going to take you around the NFC, some headlines from this past week from some of the Eagles' top rivals in the National Football Conference. So a lot to get to here on this edition of Eye on the Enemy. Let's start off with 5 preseason observations that I've had with this Eagles team through the first 2 preseason games, and of course all the reporting that's been taking place with regard to training camp. And the first is that Jalen Hurts is ready to dominate here in 2024. And this also leads me to it confirms what I believe happened last year, and that is that he was not able to prepare as well for the 2023 season. And I will maintain that Jalen Hurts' issues last year all stemmed from the offseason leading into the 2023 season. I mean, when you think about it, here you have a young quarterback who just had an MVP caliber season, was the best player on the field in the Super Bowl, and then had that crushing loss. But Jalen Hurts emerges onto the scene as a bona fide superstar NFL player, one of the next faces of the league, right? I mean, he outplayed Patrick Mahomes in that Super Bowl. And so now you have more demands on your time. He was on the cover of every magazine. He did interviews with every single news outlet, media outlet out there. At the same time, he had a shortened offseason than he had ever had before because they went to the Super Bowl. So less time to get ready, less time to, I guess, maybe even relax after the 2022 season. So now you've got to ramp it up more quickly, and you've got all of these other obligations. When you become a megastar like that, you have so many more obligations on your time, charity events to go to, requests that the team and the league wants you to be a part of, media appearances, all that kind of stuff. I guarantee you that ate into his time to prepare for the regular season. And he didn't look physically right, and he was not mentally right going into the 2023 season. And he had those the coaching changes, the shakeups there certainly hurt. And they seemed, the reporting from ESPN a couple of weeks ago was fantastic. I think that was our first really true insight into just what the heck happened. I think we finally got some answers as to what happened in 2023. And I know people were looking at that article and wondering, why are we still talking about this? Because if you don't identify the problems that happened last year, they can repeat themselves in 2024. And so you ask yourself, if you can't pinpoint the reason for the failures of 2023, what makes anyone think that they're actually doing anything to prevent them from happening again in 2024? It seems as though the coaching changes, bringing in Kellen Moore as the offensive coordinator and Vic Fangio as the defensive coordinator, are going to help. There certainly are an upgrade over what we had before last year with Sean Desai as a guy who was not really ready to be a defensive coordinator, it didn't seem, but then handing over the keys to Matt Patricia in the way that they did was certainly a disaster. And then Brian Johnson and Nick Sirianni. It doesn't sound like Sirianni ever really let Brian Johnson do his job. And I think Nick Sirianni had that Super Bowl hangover effect last year. All of this now seems to be behind them. Jalen Hurts has been playing lights out in training camp and the joint practices. but we haven't seen him in a preseason game yet, and we won't. That's going to be one of my next observations. But he appears to be ready to have a monster season here in 2024. And so that's if you are at all nervous about the Eagles and how some of these different things are going to work out, if Jalen Hurts is playing at the level he's capable of playing and can stay healthy, this team's going to win a ton of football games. They're going to win a ton of football games this year. And we're going to see a team that resembles the 2022 version more than we'll see one that resembles the 2023 version. That's my first observation, is that Jalen Hurts just looks locked in, that he spent this whole offseason getting ready for the season, that he didn't. And that was the thing. When you get knocked out of the playoffs in the wild card round, when the season ended the way it did, your season ends 3 weeks earlier, so he had a normal offseason this time around, and nobody was clamoring for interviews, and he didn't have an obligation. He didn't feel like he had to respond to every interview request and every charity appearance. I mean, I'm sure those things were still out there. I'm sure those things were still, part of his time. And we didn't even talk about the fact that he was negotiating a new life-altering contract. I guarantee you he got calls when he probably least wanted to take a call about his contract situation. So, again, Jalen Hurts is going to have a monster season here in 2024. My second preseason observation is that I really do think the starters should play in the final preseason game. Not a lot, maybe a couple of series, but I would like to see Jalen Hurts get in there. I would like to see Saquon. I would like to see AJ. I would like to see Devontae Smith. I think it's important. I really do. I mean, I think that's something that we've lost over these last 10 years in the NFL, where most teams don't play their starters in the preseason at all. I don't necessarily know that there's a correlation between getting off to a slow start and not playing your starters. In 2022, the Eagles raced out to that incredible start, and really the same thing last year, and their starters never played in the preseason. But I wonder if last year, I think we've seen Nick Sirianni is running harder practices, tougher practices. I think he wants to toughen the guys up with the way they wilted at the end of last year. I think that can only help them. And I think getting in a preseason game, getting in a little real game action would benefit them as they enter, especially when you've got a new offensive coordinator and you've got a new defensive coordinator and you're working a bunch of new guys in. I would play the starters. I think it helps. And of course, you run into the nightmare scenario, of course, of a guy that you can't afford to losing him to an injury in a game that doesn't count. That, of course, is the nightmare scenario. That's the Trent Green scenario, and there's not always a Kurt Warner to rescue you. A lot of times the season ends before it even begins. If a star quarterback, if Jalen Hurts goes down, tears an ACL in the preseason game, season's over. Because I mean, whoever is the backup quarterback is not Jalen Hurts. So I get it. I get why they don't play the starters in the preseason game. But I don't think you don't need to play them long. I would love to see Jalen Hurts in the first team offense just get a series or two. Just get a series or two and then get him out of there for decades. Starters played preseason games it was like in the first game, they didn't really play, maybe a quarter. Same thing in the second game, they played maybe a quarter. And then in the third game, they played like the whole first half. And I remember Andy Reid sometimes when he wasn't happy with what he was seeing, those guys would come out and start the third quarter. And then in the fourth preseason game, everybody rests. I don't think they need to go to that degree, but I do think it would be good for the starters to play a little bit here in the preseason. So that's my second observation. I would like to see, and we didn't see the starters at all in the second preseason game against the Patriots. It was all second-teamers for the most part. Not all second-teamers for the most part. Mostly second-teamers. And anybody who may be a starter was pulled from the game pretty quickly. My third preseason observation is that if there's any justice in the world, if we're really looking at this team with the best intention of getting the best players in the best positions, then Tanner McKee has to be this team's backup quarterback. He has looked light years better than Kenny Pickett. Kenny Pickett stinks. He was not good with the Steelers. I don't know why Howie Roseman felt like he would be good here. He stinks. I mean, some of the numbers from the preseason game were abhorrent with the depth of target throws and the inaccuracies and the inefficiency. I mean, Tanner McKee, that offense just looks light years better with Tanner McKee under center. And he's in his third year now, right? I mean, Maybe it's not third year. Maybe it's his second year. It doesn't matter. He's a better quarterback. Now he's not as mobile as the other guys, but he makes quicker decisions and he's willing to push the ball down the field a little bit more. And I think if you're looking for a backup quarterback, I would get more excited about what Tanner McKee could do in relief of Jalen Hurts than I would be with Kenny Pickett. We know what Kenny Pickett is. We know what Kenny Pickett can do. I think Tanner McKee, and it's so funny when you think about it. Tanner McKee was an undrafted rookie, right? I mean, they didn't draft him, and Kenny Pickett went really early in the draft. And you look at these two guys, it's like, how does that happen? How is it that hard to judge what a quarterback is going to do from college to the NFL? It should be a pretty easy position because it's got a lot of light on it. I mean, we all see what these guys do in college. It shouldn't be that difficult, but it is. I mean, obviously there's reasons that you have so many quarterback busts. But the fact that you've got Tanner McKee and Kenny Pickett on the field at the same time, and the guy who no one wanted coming out of college is clearly the better choice than the guy who got drafted super early, one of the top quarterbacks drafted that year. It's just weird. Quarterback analysis, quarterback evaluation is just way harder than it should be. But it's a complicated position. A lot goes on inside the brain, and some guys just do not adjust to the speed of the NFL. Preseason observation number 4. I think Vic Fangio was exactly what this defense needed, and you can tell this team just has way more talent than it did a year ago, especially in the secondary. I mean, I don't. It's really difficult to say who your starting cornerbacks could be. Darius Slay is going to start at one side, and it looks like Isaiah Rodgers is going to be the other starter, and Quinyon Mitchell, their first-round pick, sounds like he's going to be the starting slot corner. But you're also seeing a lot of really good things out of Keely Ringo, and you drafted Cooper DeJean to play a role. Now he's missed basically all of training camp and both these preseason games, so he's going to start this season, and it's not going to be a redshirt season for him, but he's not going to probably play a whole lot except for on special teams. But they've got some really good talent there in the secondary, and with Reed Blankenship, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, it looks like Avonte Maddox is now going to be a full-time safety, and Tristan McCollum back there, so that's a decent safety room. And then you've got at linebacker. I think the linebacker room is better. I am intrigued by Jeremiah Trotter Jr. I will admit. I don't think he is obviously a guy who's going to get on the field for more than 10% of the team's defensive snaps this year. Maybe 15%, if somebody gets hurt. But right now, the battle is, who starts among Devin White, Zach Bond, and Nakobe Dean. And I know Dean has played better as of late. Devin White, they got, as a free agent from the Tampa Bay Bucks, and they traded for Zach Bond. But wouldn't it all surprise me if Nakobe Dean works his way in front of one of those two guys on the depth chart? But they've just got, it's a more the defensive line, the edge rushers specifically, still worries me a little bit. I don't know that they have enough there, although Jalex Hunt has been surprisingly productive here in the preseason, and Nolan Smith has, gotten a couple of sacks here and there, and and Bryce Huff has been coming on. He had a good practice on Tuesday, looked pretty good in the second preseason game, so maybe Bryce Huff is going to start to step it up and be able to play on first and second downs. But, I mean, the bottom line is that Vic Fangio is a far cry from Sean Desai and Matt Patricia. So the Eagles got a really good one there, and all of the issues that he had in Miami with people complaining about him, and you still hear Miami defenders complaining about, now there's so much more communication, now there's all this, there's all that. The Eagles didn't need that. The Eagles didn't need a defensive coordinator who was touchy-feely and wanted to hear from they needed a guy who was in charge. They needed a coach to get in there and coach these guys up. Because sometimes, it's not a democracy. You need a good, strong coach to coach the defense. And that's what Vic Fangio is. This is the style of defense that Nick Sirianni really likes, and I think they've got the players to do it now. And then finally, this might be the best cornerback room we've seen in Philadelphia since the Lito Shepherd, Sheldon Brown days. I mean, this is when you've got Slay and Rodgers and Mitchell and Ringo, and again, Cooper DeJean is out there. There's a lot of talent. There's a lot of talent among these cornerbacks, and I do think Mitchell will start the season as the nickel. It sounds like it's going to be Isaiah Rodgers and Darius Slay, and it's looking good right now. Even though they haven't intercepted Jalen Hurts in practice, everything you see is that's Jalen Hurts. Like he's been that dynamic. All right, let's get to my 10 bold predictions for the 2024 season. I wrote this story for bleedinggreennation.com at the beginning of the week, so I won't go through all of the details or anything like that, but I'll give you my 10 predictions. And the first is that with Kellen Moore in the fold, I believe Eagles tight ends will combine for 7 or more touchdowns. Grant Calcaterra sounds like he's having a pretty good summer as well. When Moore was in Dallas, guys like Jason Witten and Dalton Schultz got a lot of production. In fact, in 2021, Moore's last season as the Cowboys offensive coordinator, Schultz had 78 catches for 808 yards and 8 touchdowns, with Blake Jarwin and Sean McKee getting 3 touchdowns between them. So I don't think Goddard and Calcaterra are going to combine for 10 scores because there's a lot of other players that need the ball, but I think the tight ends will be utilized more in the Kellen Moore offense, and that's where I see 7 or more touchdowns for the combination of Dallas Goedert and Grant Calcaterra. Bold prediction number 2, I do believe Tanner McKee will become the Eagles' backup quarterback at some point over the next week or so. I mean, maybe it happens in season, but I think Tanner McKee is a better player. I mean, he's looked way better, and so I know they gave up draft capital for Kenny Pickett, but I think it's going to be about getting the best players for a Super Bowl run ready to go, and I think it's going to be Tanner McKee as the backup quarterback. Bold prediction number 3, and I'm feeling less confident about this one as the days go on. Johnny Wilson has 40 or more receptions as the regular slot receiver. For most of the summer, and it seems like he's been the leading candidate to be the number 3 receiver, but he's had a rough couple of practices, a rough preseason game, and now he's injured with a hamstring issue, so the Eagles may have to go outside the organization to get somebody to be the number 3 receiver. I really think they should. But the reason I said 40 or more passes is because in Quez Watkins' first season as the full-time slot receiver, he caught 43 balls for 647 yards. So 40 catches, if Johnny Wilson does become the number 3 receiver, should be a pretty good prediction, although there is some boldness to it there. Number 4, Cam Jurgens replaces Jason Kelce adequately at center. I don't know why I'm so confident in this. Watching him in the preseason a couple seasons ago, I guess it was, he looked just like Jason Kelce, man. He was doing some of the same stuff Kelce was doing, running downfield and making blocks on the second and third level. I mean, really, he's an athlete. I don't know if he's the athlete that Jason Kelce was, but he's Kelce's handpicked successor. So I think he, in particular, on the offensive line, is going to be just fine. Bold prediction number 5, Jalen Hurts rushes for 750 yards or more. I just, everything you're hearing about him and seeing about him in training camp is that the juice is back, that he's got the juice back. He didn't have it last year. Hurts had only 605 yards on the ground a season ago. That was down from 760 and 784 the 2 years before. I think he's going to get back into that territory that we saw in 2021 and 2022. I think he'll be back over 750 yards rushing with a few additional non-tush-push touchdowns coming too. All right. We've got, let's see, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 more of these. So this is number 6. Nolan Smith records 7 or more sacks. I think he's going to see the field a lot more, and I think, if he can get a sack like every other week or mix him up a little bit. 7 sacks is not asking too much from your first round pick from a year ago. Bold prediction number 8. Saquon Barkley finishes with 1,400 or more total yards. Barkley still has the juice, guys, and with a playoff-bound Giants team in 2022, he ran for 1,312 yards and also caught 57 passes for 338 yards. That's good for 1,650 total yards and 10 touchdowns. So I don't think he's going to get that much. But I think he'll break the 1,400 total yard barrier. He'll have more than 1,000 on the ground and another 400 plus in the air, some combination like that. Bold prediction number 9, Quinyon Mitchell has 4 or more interceptions. I think, again, as the starting slot corner, he's going to get a chance to pick some balls off. And, bold prediction, a rookie getting 4 more interceptions. That wouldn't be bold if we didn't go that high. So let's do that. So I think I said Quinyon Mitchell was number 9, but he's actually number 8. Number 9 is Jalen Carter, named first team All-Pro. He's going to have a monster season. I think he's going to be one of the 2 best defensive tackles in football. A bold prediction. A non-bold prediction would have been to say he's going to the Pro Bowl. A bold prediction is to say first team All-Pro. The chances are more likely than not he's not going to be first team All-Pro. Maybe second team All-Pro. But it's not a bold prediction unless you're willing to push the envelope a little, is it? All right, bold prediction number 10. The Eagles win the Super Bowl. You know, it's my bold prediction that the Eagles win the NFC Championship game but lose it. No, that's not bold. That's not bold. You know, that's wishy-washy. Right? That's milquetoast predictions. That's not a bold prediction. If you want to make a bold prediction, you got to take a side. You got to take a stand on something. And this Eagles team, I think, has a ton of talent on it. I think they have actual real coaches in place to coach the offense and the defense. I think there's grown-ups in the room. And most importantly, they've added way more talent to this team, especially on the defensive side. The defensive side actually looks like it can hold up its end. They may not be a top 10 unit in the NFL, but they can hold up their end, and it certainly seems for all the world like Jalen Hurts means business here in 2024. So, with that being said, I think the Eagles win the Super Bowl. That is bold prediction number 10. All right, finish up this edition of Eye on the Enemy. Let's take you through some news from the week around the NFC. We'll start in San Francisco, and the big question there is, will wide receiver Brandon Ayuk get traded? Initially, the 49ers said that they wouldn't. I mean, this story has taken a journey through the woods, folks. And initially, the 49ers insisted that they would not trade Ayuk, and then they started fielding calls ahead of the draft, but decided not to trade him. Then they went back on their stance and said that they wanted Ayuk to be on the field this season. They realized how important he was to the team. But then he holds out during training camp. And the 49ers reportedly discussed trade options with several teams. Then word came back that a long-term extension wasn't off the table. But then this week, NFL Network insider Ian Rappaport said that the 49ers have a deal in place with Pittsburgh to consummate if Ayuk does not sign in San Francisco long-term. And on Friday, 49ers general manager John Lynch said on the radio that he understands the urgency of the matter and how important it is for him to be on the field for the 49ers, but also declined to say what the odds were of Ayuk staying in San Francisco. So it sounds like a deal is in place already if the two sides can't get together on a contract extension. You know, you watch the Eagles re-sign the guys they want to re-sign, and then jettison the guys they don't want to re-sign, like Hassan Reddick. Hassan Reddick wanted more money. The Eagles didn't want to pay him the kind of money he was looking for, so they trade him. And they get an emerging pass rusher in return. I still would rather have Hassan Reddick on this team. I probably would have bitten the bullet and traded him, but Hassan Reddick now is asking to be traded from the Jets, and the Jets say, nope, we're not doing that. But he also doesn't have a new contract extension, and Reddick is holding out. So the Eagles just don't get themselves into these kinds of situations. They trade guys away when the contract is an issue, and they don't look back. San Francisco should have gotten this done a long time ago. I don't understand why they haven't. They're not paying a quarterback big-time money, are they? Did Brock Purdy sign a big deal and I'm not aware of it? I mean, no. So he's making he's the guy, when he officially signed as the last guy drafted, it was a 4-year, $3.7 million contract. Like they're paying him under, his average salary is $934,000 a year, which is good money. I wish I made that kind of money, but that's not, that's not money that, prevents you from signing Brandon Ayuk to a contract extension. So this whole thing in San Francisco is just weird. And there's just some vibes going on in San Francisco. They've got that, they really do have the Super Bowl hangover vibe right now. We'll see how long it lasts, but the 49ers just are one of those teams, it's tough losing the Super Bowl. Like you get that close and, that's an emotional roller coaster, and especially the way that they lost it when they really felt like they had the game in hand. We know how that feels. And it wouldn't at all surprise me to see the 49ers have a season in 2024 like the Eagles had in 2023. That's actually one of my big predictions for this season, is that the 49ers take a step backwards, that they don't finish with the best record in the NFC. I think, they probably still win enough games to make the playoffs, but they're nowhere close to what they were a year ago.
Judy was boring.
Hello.
Then Judy discovered ChumbaCasino.com.
It's my little escape.
Now Judy's the life of the party.
Oh, baby, mama's bringing home the bacon.
Whoa, take it easy, Judy. The Chumba life is for everybody. So go to ChumbaCasino.com and play over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
All right, let's take a look in Detroit. And the Lions appear to have escaped a major injury to one of their running backs, Jahmyr Gibbs, the guy they took in the first round and got laughed at last year by me and others for doing it. He turned out to be quite an important player for their offense last year. He injured his hamstring at the end of last week. It sounded initially like it could be a serious hamstring injury, but it looks as though Lions head coach Dan Campbell is saying that Gibbs is going to be okay. He said, I think we're going to be fine here. So talking to ESPN, so he says, I think we'll be good. So it doesn't appear as though Jahmyr Gibbs, it appears as though he avoided a major injury to his hamstring that would have kept him out for months. Looking at the Dallas Cowboys, what is going on in Dallas? You talk about a team that could take a step back this year. I think the 49ers and Cowboys could both take steps back here in 2024 because the Cowboys won the division last year, but it doesn't feel like it, does it? You've got the CeeDee Lamb holdout. He continues to hold out of training camp as he looks for a new deal. Look, just sign your wide receivers, guys. The Eagles did it with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. Sign your wide receivers, folks, especially when it's clear they're the best option that you've got. But Jerry Jones said he doesn't seem all that worried about Lamb getting a deal or having him report to training camp. So the CeeDee Lamb situation is still kind of hanging out there. I can't imagine that they would trade him. But if he's not in training camp, he can't play. And maybe they're thinking, once the game checks stop, CeeDee Lamb will get back into the fold. And, he very well may do that. But, that's just going to create all kinds of drama there in Dallas, which is an Eagles fan we're quite pleased with. So, yeah, just please let that continue to blow yourselves up on this one. Dak Prescott, meanwhile, says good things are happening in his contract extension talk. So it looks like, Dallas is going to hitch their wagon to Dak Prescott long term. And the Cowboys have made a trade with their NFC East rival New York Giants. They get veteran defensive tackle Jordan Phillips and a 7th-round pick in 2026 for a 2026 6th-round pick. So the Cowboys are just picking up some depth along the defensive line there. Some tough news in Minnesota. Rookie quarterback J.J. McCarthy, who's looked really good in the preseason so far, suffered a meniscus tear in his knee at some point during the game on Thursday, was it? No, it was on Saturday, last Saturday. And he is going to miss the entire season in 2024 after needing surgery on the meniscus tear. Turned out to be worse than they thought it was going to be. So the number 10 overall pick in the draft will miss the 2024 season. Sam Darnold will take over as the starting quarterback. The Atlanta Falcons had a very busy week, and this could be a team that takes a big step forward here. And, they've got an easy schedule in the NFC South, and they have been adding talent, and they've been doing a job here. I mean, they really do look like they are on the verge of being a playoff team. Michael Penix Jr. appears ready to take hold of the quarterback job. They traded with the New England Patriots. The Patriots were having contract issues with their top edge rusher, Matthew Judon. And so they trade him to the Falcons for a 2025 3rd-round pick. Judon had been practicing with the Patriots after being away from the team. He is under contract with them, and it looks like the Falcons are going to continue talking to him about a contract extension. Judon turned 32 last week. He's a 4-time Pro Bowler who had a career-high 15.5 sacks in 2022, following a 12.5 sack season in 2021. Now, he did miss most of last season with a torn bicep, so he does have an injury that he's working his way back from, but still had the juice as of 2022. And the reason this was such an important trade, the Falcons have not had a double-digit sack leader since Vic Beasley in 2016, which is, by the way, the last time the Falcons went to the Super Bowl. They also signed safety Justin Simmons, a guy who had been linked to the Eagles repeatedly over and over again this offseason, to a 1-year, $8 million deal. NFL Network insider Ian Rappaport and Tom Pelissaro reported that of the $8 million, $7.5 million is fully guaranteed. So the Eagles will not be adding Justin Simmons to their safety room. I guess they're happy with what they have and didn't want to spend $8 million on Justin Simmons, who was part of an awful Denver defense last year. But the Falcons are hoping that he was just, caught up in a pretty massive problem over there and not a symptom of that problem. Last team we're going to talk about here on this edition is New York Giants. The New York Giants and their wide receiver Darius Slayton could be on the move. Now, the reason I'm mentioning this is because I think he would be a phenomenal addition to the Philadelphia Eagles wide receiver room. I think they desperately need a number 3 wide receiver who then can also jump outside if Devontae Smith or A.J. Brown have to miss a game or two. Like if those guys are out for 2 months, there's nobody out there you can get that's going to match that production level. The Eagles are going to have to run the ball more. It's going to have to be more on Jalen Hurts' shoulders. But Darius Slayton, it would be a great number 3 receiver. Great numbers last year as the slot receiver. 50 catches for 770 yards and 4 scores. Man, can you imagine bringing a guy like Darius Slayton and having him play in the slot? Now, would the Giants trade him to the Eagles? I guess it depends on whether or not the Giants feel like they're in a rebuilding year or whether they think they can actually compete for a wild card. If they think that last year was a blip, that they can get back to the kind of success they had in 2022, then they almost certainly don't trade him within the division to the Eagles. And I don't know what would be required to give up. I mean, would you have to give up maybe like a 4th-round pick, 5th-round pick for Darius Slayton? He's a productive player. 5th-round pick in 2019. He's caught 220 balls for 3,324 yards and 19 touchdowns in 76 career games with the Giants. He'd be perfect for this offense. He'd be a perfect fit. I'm just not so sure that the Giants would be willing to trade him within the division to their arch nemesis, the Eagles. But I guess they could ask for a king's ransom and maybe try and if the Eagles gave them a 4th-round pick, the Giants would be stupid not to do that, right? I mean, a 4th-round pick for Darius Slayton, I would do that if I were the Eagles, and if I were the Giants, I would also do that deal. But I'm not good with football trades. I have no idea whether or not that would actually be something the Giants would be interested in. They might just want to keep him out of Philadelphia altogether, especially after Saquon Barkley left for Philadelphia. They may not want to go down that road again. But if I'm Howie Roseman, I'm making the phone call, and I'm getting aggressive about adding Darius Slayton, because here's the other thing. The Detroit Lions are also hunting around for a number 3 wide receiver. They're very happy with their top 2 guys, but they very much need a number 3 wide receiver as well, and they have been linked to Darius Slayton. My guess is the Giants would probably rather trade him to a team like the Lions, a team that's not in the division. But it all depends on the compensation, right? What would the Lions be willing to give up? What would the Eagles be willing to give up? The Giants have to take the best offer and not worry about Darius Slayton beating them. And by the way, if they're going to lose to the Eagles, it's likely not going to be because of Darius Slayton. It's going to be because of Hurts, Barkley, Brown, Smith, Goddard, the defense. It's not, Darius Slayton is far down on the list. My main concern is that we get Darius Slayton and Darius Slay confused all the time. Like it's going to be, can you imagine the chaos in the clubhouse? It would be too much. But we'll see. I think it'd be a great move for the Eagles to go out and get Darius Slayton and have Darius Slay cover him in practice for a little while. Slay on Slayton, Darius Slay on Darius Slayton. Let's do this. Let's get crazy here as we have just a couple more weeks before the start of the 2024 regular season. So next week we'll have a guest on to kind of set up the 2024 season. And what I will do is I'll give you my NFC power rankings next week of the NFC, how I see all these different teams, where they're stacked up right now, and we'll have a guest on to talk about that as well. So we'll do that coming up next week here on Eye on the Enemy. But that's going to do it for this edition of Eye on the Enemy. It is good to be back. It's good to be so close to the start of another Eagles season, and we will keep you informed. We will keep an eye on the enemy at all times here on this podcast, let you know what the Eagles' rivals are doing and what the teams we're going to be facing that week will be doing. But we'll jump into that mode here in a couple of weeks. In the meantime, continue to read up on bleedinggreennation.com for the latest information on the Birds, and I have to direct you to the Pin Pull Network. I mean, I'm sure you already are a subscriber, but we have so many great shows coming up this year. Of course, you've got On the Shane Page, which is, I guess, our signature show with Shane Haff and Johnny Page. Those guys do a phenomenal job going through all the ins and outs. We're going to have a post-game live show for you after each and every game. Chalk Talk, Birds of the Round Table. So lots of great stuff during the course of this 2024 season. Make sure that you tell a friend to subscribe to the Eagles. Tell multiple friends to subscribe to the Eagles Pin Pull Network, and make sure that you check out Eye on the Enemy each and every week. We're going to drop these shows likely on Friday afternoons or Saturdays for you, so make sure that you're checking those out. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We'll talk to you next week right here on Eye on the Enemy.